Okay, so today we're going to work on exercise 206, and 206 we're basically we're at a point where you guys need a bunch of skills, and I have to find a way to throw a bunch of skills at you and get you used to how do you build objects. And so the easiest way of doing that is for the next couple of class periods, I'm basically going to give you an object, show you how to model it, and go through a bunch of skills that you're going to need to do it. So today we're dealing with kind of rectangular sloping surfaces, chamfering corners, that sort of thing in terms of detail. Next class we're going to get into a bunch of like tubes and pipes and round objects and that sort of thing. So we're trying to get through a couple of those to give you a certain set of skills, and then we'll start to get you guys into building some objects on your own, where you'll explore, okay, how am I going to do this and how do I conceptually go through it. We start with more of the basic objects, and as the semester goes on we get more and more into the swoopy, curvy, pillowy objects because it takes time to get ready to do that, and you have to have a certain set of skills before we can do that. So today's another day in kind of basic shapes, but this one's a little bit more complicated than anything you've made so far, and it will reinforce a lot of the skills that we've already used, like lofting two curves together to create a surface. We'll do that. Patching a closed surface to create a surface. So it's a lot of those kinds of things. So I'm going to go ahead and start drawing in the top view, and I've given you on the bottom of your sheet here, I gave you the object so that you can create it, but it's good to kind of work through it and practice. So I'm going to use the Polyline tool again. I should also confirm that inches are my default unit, which they are. It's way down here. Sorry, you probably can't see it behind there. Inches are my default units. I also have the persistent object snap dialog box on down here at the bottom. So if you don't, it's under tools, object snap, persistent object snap dialog. It should be on. And I'm going to go ahead and start with the Polyline tool right here, and I'm going to start at point 0, 0 as I draw. And I'm on this little drawing, I put point 0, 0 right at the inside corner there as a place to start. And then I'm going to go ahead and start my drawing. So I'll go over 48 inches in that direction. Then we zoom out a little bit. Then I'm going to go up 36 inches. So again, I'm doing length and then direction that I want to go. The top here is 4 inches. Okay, so now here's an interesting one. Okay, if we look at the edge of this, right, it slopes out by 2 inches over the course of the 36 inches. So if I want to draw that, it's much harder to type the length, right? Instead, I would use relative coordinates. So this is a perfect opportunity to use relative coordinates. So I'll say at, and I need to specify the x distance first, so it would be 2 inches, comma, the y distance, which would be negative 36. And by doing that, I can get that sloping line. And this is why I want to overemphasize the use of these coordinates, because on certain objects that you're trying to draw, really the most efficient way of doing it is to use that relative coordinate system. Okay, so I just did that, and we'll continue. I'm going to go down 6 inches. So again, I'll do it in direction. There it is, down. Now, once again, I am going to go over 30 inches here, and I'm going down another 6 inches. So once again, an opportunity for a relative coordinate. I'm going to say at. This time it's going to be negative 30 inches because I'm going this way. So we'll say at negative 30 inches, comma, negative 6 inches because I'm also going down 6 inches. I'll hit enter. That gets me into the center. Now I'm going up this time, so I'll say at negative 30 inches again, because I'm still going that direction, this direction, comma, positive 6 inches, because I'm going back up. Whoops, I didn't have a comma, sorry. At negative 30 inches, comma, not period, 6 inches. That gets me back up. And so I'm going to go up 6 inches here. And then I need to go, again, relative coordinate, at 2 inches, comma, 36 inches, to create that part of the slope. And then I'll go over 4 inches, and then I'll come back down, and I'll finish the shape. And I can either snap here to the end point, or I can actually type C for close, and it will close the shape for me. And I'll end up with this as my shape. Okay? So you can do this by drawing little helper lines instead of doing the relative coordinates. It's just a lot more efficient if you do it. So for example, I could go 36, or it's 48, sorry, 48 over, perfect, we're going to go up 36, and we could go over 4 inches, oops, 4 inches, and then when I got to this point here, I can say, okay, well, let me go down my 36, and then over my 2 inches, right? And then I could come back up, and I could make that little shape, and then I could go back in and delete these extra pieces. There's delete, and then I could explode this one, and then I could get rid of that one. But to me, that's a whole lot of extra work that's not necessary. So if you get used to using those relative coordinates at certain moments in time, and you think about the basic grid system, it's far more efficient. So a shape that's something like this, for me, I could do it extraordinarily quickly, just with those coordinates. So I went through it rather slow with you guys, but if you're mentally going through it in your head, you just, any straight distance, that's easy, it's just distance and direction, and then when you get to one of those sloping lines, you just think about what's the x, what's the y, is it negative or positive, and you draw it rather quickly. And the nice thing out of it is we get a nice closed shape that's ready to work with. Okay? So let me go ahead and I'm going to jump back into the perspective view so we can take a look at this shape. And I'm going to use the rotate 3D command, which we used before, to rotate this object so that it's standing up in its third dimension. So I'll use, it's under transform, rotate 3D, or you can type rotate 3D. And once again, it's going to ask me the start of the rotation axis. And the rotation axis is the axis around which I want to rotate. Right? So in this case, the axis that I want to rotate around is that white line that we're seeing. So I'm going to go from here to there. And then an angle or first reference point, the angle or reference point is right out here. And then I want to fold it up. Okay? Now I have ortho on, which is causing me to snap. If I didn't have ortho on, I can hold down the shift key and it'll snap to 90, or I could come down and I could turn on ortho and make sure it snaps to 90. Okay? So I end up very nicely with that little object. Okay? Now I'm going to do an offset command, and this is a good opportunity to see how the offset command works. Right? So if I type offset, and my distance is going to be, I think I said it was going to be 48. I'm trying to look on my sheet. Well, whatever, we're just going to do it at 48. Okay? Generally, the offset is relatively intelligent about picking which direction I want to offset. So in this case, I want to offset it this way. If I had an object that was like this, and I wanted to offset it vertically, and I picked offset, see how it's not going vertically? In that instance, I'd have to switch into one of my side views to do the offset. Okay, so you want to be aware that the view matters, but for right now, the offset works perfectly in the perspective view, so I don't have to worry about anything. Okay? So, I have these two as enclosed polysurfaces. Technically speaking, because they're enclosed polylines, I can select both and then type loft, and I can create a lofted surface that goes all the way around both of them. So let me go ahead and go to shaded mode, and we can see that. Okay? It only works because they were created as a continuous closed polyline. If you didn't do that, then don't do that kind of a loft, and you'll instead type explode to make sure all the line segments are different. And then you could select opposing line segments and then loft each of those opposing line segments together. Right? Takes a little bit longer, but you end up with separate little surfaces. So we'll go here and here, loft, here and here, loft, there, loft. I'm just working my way around. And I'm right-clicking to repeat the loft command, and I'm holding down Shift as I select each of the sets of objects. And we'll get to the last one. Alright, so perfect. Now when I get to the end, I'm going to want to build a surface on each of the ends, and I can take all of my curves, join them together, and patch the end. The challenge with patching is when we go to do the chamfers of the surface, it's going to have an issue right here because of the way the surface comes together. So it's actually a little bit better to do this as separate little surfaces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick the surface from 3 or 4 corner points right here. It's the surface with 4 dots on the corners. And I'm going to pick each of those corners to give myself that surface. Then I will pick here, here, and there and give myself that surface. Then I will pick that and repeat there and repeat for there and repeat for here. And I end up with those surfaces. I'm going to do the same thing, right? Or I can hold down Shift and I can copy these surfaces. I'll go to Edit and then Copy. Oh, excuse me, that's not what I want to do. It's under Transform Copy. And we'll go from front to back here, and I'll end up with a nice shape on both sides. Make sense so far? Okay. Now, in the interest of efficiency, and this is something that you'll learn a lot in Rhino as you get used to it, when you can build a smaller piece and use mirror to build out the rest of the pieces, a lot of times it's much faster to build. So if I personally were building this shape, I'm going to show you how I would go about doing it in the interest of explaining efficiency here. I would draw just part of the shape. So let me go ahead and with my Polyline tool, I'm going to draw part of the shape. Right? So I would do just a quarter of it. So I do 24, 36, 4 at negative 2 inches, comma, negative 36 inches there, 6 inches there, and at 30 inches, comma, negative 6 inches. Oops. 6 inches, and then at 30 inches, comma, negative 6 inches there. Okay, so I end up just building that part of it. Okay, rotate 3D. Snap it up. Offset 24. So I have just those two, right? Loft. Okay. And then surface from 3 or 4 corner points. And I'll build this out. Like that. Now I have a quarter of it, and so I'm just going to mirror there, and then I'll take the whole thing and I'll mirror there. So in the efficiency scale, that was much easier than building the whole object, right? It's the same thing, but it's just a different way of going about doing it. So you'll get faster and faster at those kinds of techniques, but sometimes I like to show you why I might do something in one way versus another. So anyway, let's go back to our first object. I'm going to select the object and then type Z for zoom and S for selected so that it's centered in my field of view. And now I'm going to use the chamfer surface command to give bevels on each of the edges of this. And so it's up under, well, eventually, there we go. It's up under surface, chamfer surfaces, or chamfer surf. And I am going to specify distances first. And I think I say I want it to be a ½ inch, so I'm going to type distance here, and then I'm going to say 0.5. My second distance is also going to be 0.5. Okay, And then I do want to trim, yes, and I want to extend. So what am I going to do? I'm going to select the first surface, which would be right here, and I'll select the second surface. And you see how it gives me that little bevel on the edge of it there? Okay, I can right click to repeat the chamfer, and I'll go here and I'll go there. Okay, not too bad so far. We continue on. I'll go here and there, and I'll go here and there. Okay, and then we'll start to look at these outsides. So I want to do there and there. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. And I want to do here and here, and that also is looking okay. And ultimately I'm going to want to do that surface and that surface. Okay, so the sides of the surface are looking great, but these corners really aren't looking that great. Right? There's lots of overlaps. So I'm going to have to go in and clean up these corners, which is another good skill builder. So let me go ahead and finish with the chamfers. A few more. And then we'll go through and clean it up. There. Yeah. Because this has a little taper on it, that's part of why we're building it this way. So you're saying if I had the profile curve and then I extruded it, yeah, you could build it that way. You'd still have to chamfer the surfaces. So it's a good strategy, right? So let's say I had this, and let me copy it. Hold on a second, and let me mirror it. Oops. All right, so I have that. Let me join it together. Okay, now if I'm going to extrude this, extrude curve, right? Making sure that it's solid. Yes, I could go back and say 4 feet. Oops, that was opposite direction, and it created the surface. Okay, nothing wrong with that. But these chamfers I'm still going to have to go back and do. All right, so if I did it here, chamfer surface, I could pick here and there, right? Now the problem is, because this is one solid surface, see how this edge kind of tapers down and gives me a funny edge? I'm going to have to do some manual cleanup to that, where when I built it this way, if we look down here, see how it stops at that triangle because I built the surface in separate pieces. So now if I were to do the chamfer surface here and here, it matches up much nicer without having to do cleanup. So there's a give and take in strategy, right? Likewise, this bottom is one of the most challenging pieces for how those come together. Okay, so we can continue, and I'll work my way around my object, make sure I have all the surfaces chamfered nicely. I'm not going to worry about this surface here. We'll leave that flat. Do a couple more here. Now again, if I were doing this in the efficient way, I would have done this to one corner and then mirrored it so I didn't have to do it multiple times. But it's good practice anyway, which is what this is all about anyway today. So let me get through the rest of these. All right, so I made it all the way through, and now I want to take a closer look at these corners. And so in this instance, I have a surface here that extends past, right, where that corner would be. I have a surface down below here that stops at the corner, and I have this surface which kind of goes halfway there. Okay, so what I really need to do is I need to be able to trim these off and create a little bit of a surface in the middle. So what I'll do is I'll use my Polyline tool, and I'll use my snaps. Right, my end snap is on, and I'm going to draw a line that goes from this corner to that corner, and then back to this corner, and then back to where I started. And so I end up with a little triangle that's right there in the corner. I can then use that triangle to trim off these pieces that don't matter. Now this is a perfect opportunity to point something else out. So you guys see how I've drawn that triangle. Okay? If I right click to orbit, right, see how it really quickly gets out of my view and it's easy to lose, right? If I wanted to orbit around this object itself, I can type Z for zoom and then S for selected. And what Rhino does is it recenters my whole view around that one object. So now every time I orbit, I'm looking around that object specifically. Right? It works a lot better, and you'll find that that zoom selected is a command that you will use very, very frequently. So I have this little triangle here. I'm going to go ahead and use the trim command. So let's go to edit and then trim. And I'm going to trim off this triangle here. And I'm also going to trim off this triangle there. And I end up with a nice triangle in the corner. I can fill it in using the surface from 3 or 4 corner points, or I could patch it, but I'll just do it from 3 or 4 corner points this time, and end up with a nice clean corner with a nice little bevel on it. Okay? Let's go ahead and do it again right here. I'm going to go with the triangle, and we'll go there, 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 and back to the start. And I'm going to use this triangle as a trim, so I select it and go to edit, trim, and then we get rid of the extra pieces. There. And there. I'll hit enter. This time I'll use patch. I'll go to surface and then patch 2 by 2. I'll go ahead and say OK, and it creates a nice little surface for me there as well. Okay. So if I was unhappy with having that triangle as my view, I can actually do this slightly differently. I could use my polyline, right? I could go to the midpoint of this, and I could draw a line back, a line down, and a line back this way. Okay, now here once again I'm in that zooming problem, right, where I'm not centered on the view anymore. So let's go ahead and select one of those curves. I'll type Z for zoom, S for selected, and I'll recenter my view around that. Okay. Now let me take that star instead of a triangle there, and I'm going to use those to make my trim. So I'll type trim, or go to edit trim, and we'll go ahead and start to trim off these surfaces. Trim it that way. Alright, pretty good. Now in this instance I have a little piece that was missing. That's fine. I'll go back and fill that one piece in with my surface from 3 or 4 corner points. There, there, and there. And I end up with the opposite of what I did last time. So in this instance, the corner sticks out a little bit instead of being flat. It carries this plane on. If you would rather do your corners that way, that's fine. There's nothing right or wrong. The reason I'm showing you different ways is because we're trying to resolve the corner in some manner. And so however you decide to do it is perfectly fine. So I'll repeat that again. This time I'm going from the center out to each spoke here. There it is. We go ahead and select it. And I'll use trim. Trim that off. Alright, looks pretty good. Hit enter. And I'll use a surface from 3 or 4 corner points. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, looks like something happened on this surface there. Let me zoom selected and have a quick look. Alright, so those didn't quite make the center. And this is one of the problems that we can have sometimes. Let's see if this one did. Yeah, that one worked out nicely. So something was wrong in my lines, in that they don't quite intersect correctly. So in this case, probably the easiest solution is to go back to that triangle method. So we'll go back to 1, 2, and 3 there, and we'll go ahead and trim them all off. Oops, and I didn't quite get to the top here. Hold on. There. There. And we'll trim. Clean those up. For whatever reason, this curve is really struggling. There it is. Let's go ahead and delete that. Alright, so on there, we'll use a surface from 3 or 4 corner points, and I'll go ahead and put those together. Okay, so this is going to take some time and some detail work, which is the idea. I want you to spend the time getting used to it. When we get down to the bottom here, we're going to have some challenges. So in this instance, right, we can see that this chamfer is slightly off where this corner is. Now, this is something you have to consider very carefully about what the intended use of this model is going to be. Okay? So if I were to render this object from here, we wouldn't be able to tell that there's a little gap there, right? So I'd let it go. If all I'm trying to get out are renders or AutoCAD drawings or presentation boards or something like that, this is not a problem. You let it be. If you're trying to 3D print, though, right, this would make the object not watertight, which means it wouldn't 3D print correctly. So in that instance, we do need to make a correction. Okay, and so this is one of those places where it's a little bit challenging, and we need to make some edits. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this surface here, and I'm going to turn on what are called edit points. If it's going to let me turn on. All right, so that one's not a good one because the point's outside of it. Let's see here. Let me turn on the points for this one. All right, that one's not bad. So I'm going to use this point here, but I need the rest of that surface to come back, and it's already been trimmed off. So I'm going to use a command called untrim. It's under Edit, and it should be untrim. Maybe it's under Tool, Transform. I always just type it in. I don't know where it is. Anyway, it's untrim, the opposite of trim. And what that'll do is it'll give me the rest of that surface back again. And then I can look at this little point right there, and I can move that point. So I'm going to go to Move, and I'll move it so that it matches up right on that end. And then I need to do a quick trim. So we'll select this object here. I'll type trim, and I'll trim off that little extra piece that was hanging over. Now, technically speaking, what I've done is I've twisted this bevel ever so slightly to make it fit within the context of what I want. Okay? So if this is kind of an advanced topic, if you get there, I'm happy, and that's great. We can walk through it together, but it's always worth kind of showing you in the live example. If you're struggling just to get the object that we have together, don't worry about the bottom. Okay? So let me go ahead and do that one more time. I'm going to use untrim, and I'm going to select this edge. Untrim. So I'm going to select this edge right there to get the rest of my object back. I'm going to turn on the edit points right there. Oops. Enter. There's my point. Then I'm going to move this surface point from there to there. Okay, perfect. I'll use this object as a trim. And I'm going to trim off right there and end up with a nice clean edge. Okay? So you would keep going with this and finish the rest of the little pieces. When you're all done, I'm also going to ask you to assign a material to it. So to pick concrete and put a concrete material on it. Then you'll put an infinite plane below it. Right? So I'll go ahead, go to my layers. We'll rename this the bridge. I want to apply a concrete material, so let me go to Materials. I need to load concrete, so let me right-click on Scene Materials, Load Material, and I'll go to my resources on my flash drive, and somewhere I have the array materials, concrete, and we'll just use the basic concrete, that's fine. And if I preview it, yes, it looks like basic concrete. Now remember, the object selected, so we can right-click on it and say Apply Material to Selection. Perfect. There it is. And now, for the rendering, I want to add an infinite plane, but my infinite plane is a little bit too high. So I have two options. I can move my objects up or my infinite plane down. I'll go ahead and move it down. So I'm going to go to Move, Vertical, and we're just going to lower it down below my object, we hope. And I had two. That's my mistake. So it's below my object. and then we'll zoom in on my object and go ahead and let it render, and we'll end up with a nice little floating piece of a concrete bridge. Okay? So make sure that you save this as a 3DM file, because we are going to use it again as we go forward. But this is where I want you to get today. Obviously, spend time, get all the chamfers correct, get used to zooming in and working on the smaller scale. Okay? Once you're done, you'll save this image and you'll post this image to the course website. Make sure you also save the Rhino file. So I'll go to File and Save, and this would be 206. What was it? 206, perfect. And I'll go ahead and click Save. So that's saved as well. Are there any questions? No? Okay. I'll turn you loose, and obviously if you are struggling, let me know.